Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Tulip in Action from First Look to the Shop Floor. My name is Natalia and I'll be the moderator for today's session. In this webinar, we'll walk through Tulip's platform approach and composable methodologies. We'll then walk through the journey of app building and see how easily Tulip can unlock visibility and flexibility across your shop floor. And we'll follow that up with our Q&A. And now I'm excited to introduce our speaker, Kaylee Crothers. Kaylee Crothers leads pre-sales engineer for North America at Tulip. For the past 5 years, Kaylee has focused on guiding clients through their digital transformation journeys. Kaylee has collaborated with a diverse range of customers across multiple industries, helping them deploy real-time dashboards, streamline operations, and improve frontline productivity. Her deep technical expertise and customer-centric mindset have enabled Tulip to deliver measurable value to clients while driving digital adoption at scale. And now I'll pass it off to Kaylee.
So, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining today. I am personally really excited to talk about the topics that we have here. I've seen specifically composable MES really transform operations firsthand, from walking countless shop floors, really talking to customers, dealing with the frustrations that come from monolithic rigid MES systems that kind of promise a lot, but with it come a lot of complexity, inflexibility, experiences of the paper processes that need to get stood up around those systems, really operations that have to serve a system opposed to vice versa. So regardless of what industry you're in or where in the world your factory or your factories are, I think we can all relate with the fact that manufacturing is very dynamic, and now today more than ever. Through supply chain issues, tariffs is on everyone's mind, having to do tech transfers, bringing up new lines. It kind of goes on and on. And this requires the need for agile tools. So that's what we're here to talk about today. Start to kind of demystify what composable MES is and explore a little bit more into the actual product, which I'm very excited about. Some key things I think to mention to frame this up. A composable system is a system that really adapts to your unique needs, opposed to having to shove your operations into a predefined mold, whether that comes in the form of data structures or pre-built modules, for those of you who are more familiar with those traditional monolithic systems. Key takeaway, it really enables your internal teams to be able to build, connect, evolve your operations and the solutions that serve them with a focus on flexibility and speed. Those are really the two primary benefits that come with in a composable approach to shop floor technology. So let's get into it. We've talked about this kind of dynamic environment. I'm sure you guys are all very familiar with the set of challenges that are kind of overviewed here. Shop floors are complex systems. They're very dynamic. You can have probably at some point all of these struggles happening on one shop floor. I've been and worked with teams who have struggled with production visibility. They don't understand when order progression or where material is, how they're on target or not on target for the day, what's happening where and when. And then you have quality issues. Maybe they're at certain lines. Maybe it's product lines, not just physical areas. The struggles with labor and turnover, especially North America and Western Europe. I mean, these are tons of different challenges, but the point is that they're all pretty connected. These are really all pieces of the same puzzle. You can't just necessarily solve production visibility or solve, an end of quality issue. Well, you can, but the point is that attacking these together and looking at really at the fabric that makes up your shop floor, your operations, is the composable approach. These are not isolated issues. They kind of ripple through your entire operation. So how have companies kind of historically approached this and tried to solve, these interconnected issues? Well, we've typically seen, everyone's familiar with this, MES, covering kind of a subset of those issues, digital guidance, production management, quality. And then there are still other issues that exist. So that introduces the need for point solutions. You can see some kind of examples here. We have low asset utilization. Let's get an OEE point solution. CMMS. Maybe you have a specific training, learning management system, whatever they are. You start to get what we often call solution sprawl. This can result in a lot of different challenges. So, disconnected systems. There can be, integration issues, or not to be dramatic, but integration nightmares that can arise from that, because these systems are serving different areas and different purposes, but the data needs to flow between them. There's also just admin work of having all of these solutions. And for anyone, not everyone can relate to this, but also the pure overhead of just, managing various vendor negotiations and things. So with a platform approach, you're kind of fundamentally taking a different look at how to approach these problems. So you can address these problems across all these different areas by taking a value-based approach. So when you really kind of look holistically at your operation, you can start to distill that down into high-value areas and start and deploy a solution just for that, and start to grow over time, kind of build your foundation up, getting your arms around really all of the different areas, use cases, and solutions that are going to add value. I think one really important thing to mention is that you do not need to rip and replace existing systems. With a composable approach, you can gradually build, integrate where it makes sense. You can start to take offline, you kind of more traditional solutions as you scale. It's definitely not a big bang approach. You want to reduce downtime, reduce risk, and that's why composable solutions have an agile methodology in terms of deployment. So when you start to have this many solutions all on one platform, existing or integrated into your existing stack, one important piece is also what that does and how that kind of future-proofs your operations. We talked a little bit about challenges that you might be facing today. Well, unfortunately, there's a whole host of different challenges that we all just don't know about yet that are kind of coming down the pipe, whether that's more global issues like, the evolution of what's happening with tariffs, or that's just more organizational things. You're going to be bringing on a new site, or you're getting really bullish on NPI and you need to stand up lines. There's no shortage of unknowns that every shop floor faces. And by having a foundation of a platform, you're able to, solve those challenges as they come because you have an agile tool that supports quick speed in terms of deployment. But you also have an open platform that can leverage the technology of tomorrow and really of today. 2025, I can't picture a world where I did work without leveraging AI tools. So how can you, start to get a foundation or a backbone on your shop floor that allows you to leverage that? Some really amazing technology has come out in the last year and a half or few years. And it's having a platform like Tulip allows you to actually leverage that where it makes sense. So getting a little bit more focused on the actual platform, like, what is the product? We kind of think about it in these 4 buckets. First and foremost, you have no-code app building. So that is your app editor. That's your drag and drop environment. That's where you can write when, if, and else statements. You do not need software development experience. Very intentionally built like Excel and PowerPoint to really lean into the skill set of your typical citizen developer, which may be IT teams, but can also be process engineering, manufacturing engineering, quality engineering, folks that are process owners and have very close proximity to not just the operations, but the challenges that they face. So they're kind of uniquely set up to most effectively solve those. There's also a whole connectivity element to the platform. So this comes in many forms. One, system integrations. So we have a robust connector framework that supports API and SQL integration. And then more on the machines and devices side, MQTT and OPC-UA. So being able to, if you're kind of a more mature, if you're at a more mature state of digital transformation, maybe you have a UNS, or you're starting to kind of take inventory as a company saying, how can we build a UNS and really leverage that? Being able to have Tulip, push and pull from that kind of greater, enterprise architecture. And then on the devices side with edge devices for that last 6 inches of connectivity. Think, error proofing a station by connecting to tools or devices, torque tool, caliper, things of the like. So through these apps, through your connectors or your integrations, you're going to have a ton of data. So Tulip does have a built-in analytics engine. We have AI capabilities on that side of the house as well to help visualize all this data. We don't reserve dashboards just for that. Think about the TV over a line or a supervisor report. Analytics can be embedded directly into applications. So right as the operator is working, that real-time feedback of if you're winning or losing on the day. So that's all kind of high-level product components. A really important fourth pillar that we like to categorize is our world-class ecosystem. Ecosystem is many different things in Tulip. So first and foremost, it's the library. It's our pre-built applications, connectors. We'll get into this also in the demo that our customers can download for free. So if you're, new to Tulip and you're thinking, okay, how would I maybe get started? I'll walk you through how to check out the library and think about some of the pre-built content and what might be most relevant to your operations. In addition to that, being a citizen development centric platform, we have university where you can get pre-built courses on how to use the platform, become certified. We have a knowledge base. We also have a community forum where our customers can talk directly to each other, share challenges that they're facing, also do a little bit of show and tell. So it's kind of a wrapper that goes around our platform, if you will. Now, when we think about MES, we probably don't think about MES as necessarily a continuous improvement tool, but Tulip is actually precisely that, especially given the iterative approach that we really push for app development and just the agile nature of that. So you can take a problem that you might be facing or a challenge, let's say some bottleneck in your operation. You can deploy an MVP application. Maybe it's doing a little bit of work instructions and error proofing, a little bit of production tracking. So you're understanding, let's say, cycle times. Feedback from the operators using these applications. These can be minor or major. Minor things, I'm 5'10". Let's say that this app, is located on a screen at a height that I'm annoyed that a button is in a certain place. I want that button somewhere else. Those quality of life pieces, they don't get talked about enough. They're huge. So the ability for that, but then also for frontline feedback on the actual operation. Hey, work instructions kind of saying this. I actually really go get all my materials first, and then I bring it over. I don't, go through this flow. So it can really be a great backdrop to open up that conversation and making sure that your solution's really serving that operator. You're also able to just really quickly, instantly capture data. So for more of a process improvement side, get a really good baseline on, let's say, cycle times or training opportunities, things of the like as operators are going through applications. And then you're able to bake that back in. So for V2, for V3, as you're continuing to update these applications, you're able to incorporate that. Apps are living and breathing, if you will. An app is never fully developed. There's always opportunity for improvements. Coming out of that, so when we think about the interconnectedness of challenges that you have on your shop floor and how we think about an app is really intended to be deployed in a physical environment, a very specific area, supporting a subset of processes. And it can do many different things. So when you think about Tulip deployment, you might be future state, there's opportunity for all four, let's say, these categories here. You don't necessarily have to start with all four. You can start with, let's say, production management. We need to understand where work orders are flowing, what our cycle times are. We just need baseline data. It's a very common thing we hear from customers. Then go deploy production management, across the line. And then from that, you might say, okay, let's start to bake in some quality focuses. So maybe that's error proofing certain steps, really critical to quality, activities. Maybe that turns into then deploying work instructions across the line. And then finally, full material genealogy. There's no kind of one way to deploy Tulip. It's very dependent on, the uniqueness of your operation and the challenges that you face. Here's some examples of how our customers have actually done that based on their unique subset of issues. So you can see the top right, machine manufacturer. You can imagine very complex operation with a lot of processes that are pretty high skilled. There's a long tail of training time for those activities or for those operators. So their focus was digital work instructions, capturing a lot of the tribal knowledge that existed as they kind of had a more aging workforce, and being able to bake that into a system and reduce their training time. Or then you might have a medical device manufacturer who's trying to tighten the belt on quality issues, deployed solutions, attacking that subset, and they were able to see a 70% reduction in defects. Really want to tie this back to when you think about where do I start with Tulip, you should just think about as kind of a first step, a very simple matrix of ease of implementation versus value. There's quite a sweet spot you can strike with a relatively low-hanging fruit, something that's going to move the needle for you. That should really be the driver of how to start with a platform like this. So this is kind of a big menu slide of all of the use cases that we see, and they're very intentionally overlapping. We started this off with shop floors are complex. The challenges that they face are very interconnected. I mean, they just managing inventory, materials, resources. There's so much that happens. So these solutions are by nature interconnected. About almost 2/3 of our customers say that they have 10 or more use cases in production that kind of overlap on this mosaic. You can think about like an and-on use case. It's that solves kind of one issue, but it'd be helpful, to have also data from other use cases as part of that solution. So these aren't modules; these are focus areas that are layered and exist in applications that are deployed, in a physical area. So that's the frame up. That's kind of the why, the state of the world, why Tulip takes a composable approach, how our customers have leveraged that. We're going to move now into an actual demo. And we are going to first take a look at the library. So mention this a little bit, but this is Tulip's, and it's just tulip.co/library. So I encourage you to check it out. It's public facing. A lot of great content on here. Content's kind of intentionally vague because there's different categories. So there's applications, there's app suites. So this is going to be free to download, pre-built UI, data structure behind it. But in addition to that, there's connectors. So this is what I mentioned as pre-built integrations. So there's things from ERP integrations to kind of more smaller like Microsoft Teams integrations. These suite of connectors can also just be downloaded. So every app or app suite on the library comes with also documentation. So a video overview of it as well as an article. So as you kind of click around, encourage you to, check a lot of that out. I'm going to focus on one library offering, and this is industry specific. So you'll see many versions of composable MES. But this is a suite of templates that are built on a common data model. Common data model is a Tulip term. It really just means a set of documented and defined tables that we've kind of pre-built. And this is a take what you need type of offering. So you can see there's kind of three categories. Production management, which has a whole host of different applications, some inventory applications, as well as some quality or frontline QMS. So a great example of take what you need, production management, let's say order management. Maybe you have an ERP, or maybe you have a scheduling tool where into your APS is already flowing orders and doing resource management, whatever. You can just integrate Tulip with that and get your kind of prioritized dispatch list of work orders directly from some other system. So this is intended to A, take what you need, and then B, iterate on top of it. So that common data model is kind of intentionally simple in a way, so you can very quickly adapt to the unique needs of your operation. A really good example of that would be defect tracking. There's, regardless of your industry, regardless of what you make, there's a couple fields that everyone tracks around a defect. Unique identifier, serial number or lot number, reason, who reported it, when was it reported. Great example of what that table may look like. So let's actually take a look at the back end. So let's take visual inspection. I'm going to flip into the app editor, and let me zoom in here. This is the back end of Tulip. This is where app developers, folks from your IT org who may be working on integrations. This is where you do user management. This is where, sounds corny, but this is where the magic happens. And then there's a kind of a Tulip player where you actually run the applications. So I've downloaded this quality inspection template from the library, and we can start to take a look at, what does this app actually look like? So anytime you download a Tulip app from the library, it will come with a README step, really just instructions on what is this thing, are there articles I can read about it, as well as some instructions you can see with these two pill labels for calling out what would be a required thing that you would need to change versus just an app builder tip. So super helpful way to kind of just orient you once you download an app. I'm going to delete this for now because we don't need this. And what this app is a template for some inspection process. So today we're going to build out an example workflow like that. So walking through some of these steps, you can see it's pre-built with a prompt to select a work order or a unit. This is a Tulip table. So I want to take a second to talk about data management within the platform. So you have many different applications that are, process or, specific or deployed in physical areas. And what lies behind your applications is a set of tables. This is that common data model. Applications can both read and write into tables. So here's an example of a defect table. You might have 50 apps that all store defects here that you can then build analytics on top of. If I wanted to adjust this data structure, assuming I had the correct permissions, I could come in, add a field, select what the data type is, label it, save it, off to the races. So apps both read and write. They serve as definition, where you think skills matrix. How can I have an app do a lookup to make sure that Kaylee is trained to do some operation, but also for data logging. So back to our inspection app. We have a table that units representing, it could be units, could be work orders, doesn't matter, providing some context to what we're going to inspect in this workflow. So I'm going to delete some of these flags as we go through. On this table, we could add a filter. We could choose what we actually want to display. So from that entire units table, we decided for the operator what's going to be the most compelling is to understand work order, batch ID, item ID, quantity, status. These are kind of arbitrary where, there's nothing unique about these. These could be changed depending on your requirements. This could also be coming in from another system. So first step here, we'll select our work order. Second step here is to perform some kind of visual inspection. So you can see it's, some instructions that we could type out. We could also add an image. So I'll upload an image here. Let's go and add a static value. We have an image of the thing that we are going to inspect. Now, one thing to mention is that all of the logic here is really pre-built. So if I see, okay, well, what do these buttons actually do? You can see accept all. It has two different triggers on it. We open up a trigger. This is going to be the no-code side of Tulip. So when, if, then, else structure. So when the button is pressed, evaluate this if condition. So to translate this, that a table record, current inspection result is blank. So that's saying that, it hasn't already been inspected. Okay, now go do a thing. In this case, we're creating a record that's going to hold the inspection result. So we're storing what the order is, what the material is, the fact that it's passed, various things like that. One comment on triggers here, and just apps in general. There's something called a base layout within Tulip. Think PowerPoint theme. There's a lot of ability to leverage standard base layouts that you use for every single application to give a similar look and feel. Also to have certain logic that's on a base layout. So when you go to create a new app, you're starting from kind of your core root template. So maybe that's some on-step enter functions. Every time you start an app, let's make sure that someone's trained to do some process. Different things like that. So we have our work order. We added in, an image for visual inspection, but just very basic pass or fail. The next step here takes you on to a manual, input verification. So, measuring something. So in this case, it's really simple. Lower limit, upper limit, capturing the measured value. We can see our tips here, edit the trigger to set up the limits, and edit the trigger to set the location upon creating a defect. So we'll do both of those things. Applications run on variables. So an app only has access to what you've defined. Kind of it's local in a sense. Tables are global. You can point apps to any table where it makes sense, but app data is rather local. So you can see there's already a host of tables that I have connected to this application. This is not all of the tables on this instance though. So lower limit and upper limit are two variables that we are going to populate. So for set limits, when the step is open, this is what's going to say, what's my lower, what's my upper. I've just kind of arbitrarily already pre-selected 5 as well as 10. So that is what, when we run this evaluation, or the button for save, this is what's going to be deciding, if it's passed or failed. So if we open that up, when I click save value, it is going to say, is that variable inside this range? If it is, okay, do a thing, assume it's passed. If it's not, assume it's failed. So one thing that we could add to this before we get going is to maybe a gauge. Let's add some visualization here. So I've dragged in a custom widget. This is a ability to write little JavaScript widgets that you then interact with in a no-code way. And what this is going to do is just create a nice gauge, good visualization for the operator, besides just seeing, displayed numbers and entering some input. So for the value, you're going to point this to my variable of measured value, which is called measured value. That's going to be, what we're saving. For my min value, I'm just going to arbitrarily, pick some numbers here. Let's say max values, 25. For title, we could title this lower limit and upper limit. I'm going to point to our existing variables that we just set. So for lower limit, I'm going to point that there. Upper limit, I'm going to point to that variable. Background color, we can just select this to be white. And then region color, let's go with this fun color. And that's it. So now this is going to provide a gauge that's looking at what is our measured value, where are our lower and upper limits, and just give a visualization to that. There's then a step to review your results and then finish it off. And that's about it. So let's run this in test mode and we can kind of see an example of this app running. This is also known as developer mode. So this is a helpful tool as we talked about that continuous improvement loop. Apps are always living and breathing. This allows you to kind of simulate and see what all your variables are, what your record placeholders are as you're actually going through an application. So let's begin this app. We have a list of work orders. We can select one here. This is a quantity of 3, some information about what the item is. And we're going to be dumped into that kind of 2-step inspect process. So first one here is visual inspection. I can choose to reject or accept. Let's go with accept. And then the next step here is to go through for the 3 units in this batch or this lot to test them all. So we have our upper and lower limits that we set. Let's say I'm going to do something within range. You can see our gauge updated there. We can save that. I'll do another one that is in range, and just for the fun of it, let's do something that is outside of the range. So we can save that. You can see it just started a printing function because it caught that I failed this. It wants me to print something out, whether that could be a defect, request for rework, whatever it is. So we have our results here. We can go to that next step, which is our summary page. You can see that table was populated with the inspection results for this unit. We passed visual, we passed 2 of the manual inputs, and we failed that last one. Here's automatically, you can see rejecting one of them, and we can finish. We're back to the beginning of the app. So that was about, 5 minutes. Obviously, this is incredibly simple, where it's just a visual check and some arbitrary manual input. But leveraging that library content, when you have the pre-built data structure, when you have a lot of these workflows already built out, it allows you to just hit the ground running that much faster. So we wanted to keep, I think, 15 minutes for Q&A. We're about at that mark.
Yeah, we can start with the Q&A. So first question that we did answer in the chat, but I think Kaylee could go into a bit more depth is, While no code has its advantage, if anyone was interested in building low-level modules, would it be possible to still develop parts through code?
Well, no code is interested in parts through code. I'd be interested to know what you mean by parts. So it's a great question, and it's actually something that we're just considering with where AI is at in general. Like, how can we make this quicker than no code? So there are some low code abilities on the platform, like we talked about custom widgets. That little gauge that we showed was low code, but as of now, app building experience is really just no code. We are really bullish on leveraging AI in that space. So one thing we didn't chat about was AI Composer, which is the ability to upload PDFs and have that automatically create applications. So that's one thing to think about.
Yeah, next question kind of related to that is, how is Tulip building AI into the platform?
Yeah. How is Tulip not building AI into the platform? So there's a whole subset of different functions and features. So within the app experience, there's what we just talked about, automatic app generation. There's automatic app translations. So being able to translate an app to German or to Japanese with a click of a button. More operator and engineer focus. We also have a chatbot widget, which you can train on your own data. So for the operator, that's having a widget that you can train on a table. Let's say that table is a bunch of safety data sheets, and being able to interact with that directly, ask questions, get references, very much focused on a frontline use case. There's also a version of that within the backend of Tulip for more of that engineer persona. Being able to open up, let's say, a table of quality defects and being able to populate automatically analytics or ask questions on trends. Those are some examples.
So when we talk about getting started with composable MES, how do you prioritize which pains to solve with customers?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I think I kind of touched on it a little bit when we talked about, how to approach something like implementing a composable solution. Because we do not take a waterfall approach, it is an agile approach. We're really bullish on getting apps out on the floor as quick as possible. And what those apps are, which is the question, we really like to just start with finding that sweet spot between, low-hanging fruit or what you might think of as ease of implementation versus high value. So there were a couple different ways that we approach that with customers. We love going on site, go to Gemba. We can help you, create business cases, start to quantify, the different categories of issues you might be facing, cost of poor quality, just efficiency issues, things like that. That's typically what drives initial use cases.
Yeah, and kind of in that same vein, citizen development looks to be a good approach for my company. However, in the short term, we don't have the bandwidth to start. What do you propose to manage this situation?
Yeah. That's the reality for a lot of customers. So we have a couple different options. First, considering the complexity of use cases, the library can be a really helpful place to get started, even if you have one or two developers. I've seen customers have summer interns that have done incredible things. So there's one thing there to think about, what really is the lift, depending on complexity and scale. But second to that, we do have a professional services organization that can run projects and help lead solution design efforts, help train your internal teams if you do get the bandwidth. And then we have a really robust partner network that can be used, even for staff augmentation. So just like true turnkey deployments.
Yeah, and kind of to Kaylee's point, we have over 90 system integration partners that focus really in different markets, different industries. So I think that's kind of a great way to add on to, you have a very specific industry you need, or you have a specific location and you need someone who can be on site to help you provide you support. For manufacturers who are not currently using an MES, current state ERP only, how can we prepare for going live with Tulip?
Yeah. I think my question would be, this is an unfair question, but going live with what? It depends on what your challenges are, what you want to tackle first. We have countless customers that really just had an ERP and then had some collection of manual Excel paper processes supporting production. So it's a very common spot to be in. I would start first if you really don't have real-time visibility, a good pulse on how you're doing, to think about and consider use cases that are kind of lightweight and start to just expose data. In environments where you don't have real-time feedback, there can be a lot of emotion driving decision making. We feel like this product is having, quality issues because poor design, putting pressure on engineering, or we feel like, third shift is, it runs a certain way. So is it a training issue? So I would start with things like production and performance visibility. So, tracking orders, tracking cycle times, start to think about a communication tool. And then from there, once you kind of have that baseline, almost like a diagnostics on your operation, you can start to deep dive where it's relevant. Is it certain processes? Is it certain areas? Things like that.
Yeah, so we've been talking a lot about getting started, but how often do you see customers updating apps for process changes, and what's that experience like?
Yeah. So it depends. For our customers in the life sciences space, which about a third of our customer base is, there's validation process. I'm sure if you're in the life sciences world and you're on the call, all the things that come with that. So that's probably a different answer. But for our what we would call maybe general manufacturing, all the time, and it's kind of dependent on the use case, but it can be every month apps are getting rolled out. That would be new apps, and then iteration on applications is really just driven most often by the shop floor. The need for better tools. So very frequent.
And I think that might be all the questions we have. I'll give it a few minutes. Oh, one just came in. Can I add a standard routine into a library, then call upon it to build different versions of the app? And can Tulip run offline?
Can I add a standard routine into a library and then call it to build different versions of the app? I think what you're getting to with that question is having more of a one-size-fits-all app, where you have some kind of data definition behind an application. So maybe your app, you use one app everywhere and it relies on a data model. You can. It's what we typically see as what we call kind of monolithic architecture. There is no one way to build a Tulip solution. It's really kind of a spectrum of probably just better to worse. And some considerations in there are long-term, well, in the near term, scalability, and then just long-term maintenance and management. If you currently have systems that like one person who's near retirement developed, and you have that fear of when they leave, what are we going to do with that production system? There is a potential to do that with Tulip as well. Now, we have a lot of best practices and guidelines in place and program management to help steer you in a direction of really taking a composable approach to help mitigate all of that risk. Scalable data structures, very human-centric applications. In some ways, Tulip's almost self-documenting. If I need to understand a process, I can very literally go through the app in that process and understand it. So very long-winded answer to your question, you can. It's a little use case dependent, and I would want to chat further about what would be the best practice. And to your second question there, Tulip does not have offline capabilities. Cloud-based platform requires an internet connection.
And so we also have subscribed to MQ. What is the approach to subscribing to MQTT topics to Tulip apps?
Yeah. So we support MQTT. We support MQTT through our connectors, which is a little bit different than an app. It's more of a data source to the platform, so you can both subscribe and publish. It's read and write is supported, and it's through what Tulip calls machines, and then you can leverage that machine data in applications. You can also just build analytics directly on top of the machine data.
And so I think that's all of our questions. Thank you all for joining. And we really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. If you have any questions, feel free to contact the Tulip team to submit time, and we would love to talk to you further about your applications.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.